Mr. Motwane and Mr. Singh, for giving us this brilliant series. Very captivating, Black Warrant.
Thank you, ma'am.
So, both of you are creators of the show.
Yes.
Right. So, as co-creators, do you have to be on the same page, or chalk and cheese combination works better?
That's an excellent question. Um, Actually, I let Satyanshu take most of that. The only time I believe, from a larger perspective, I think the smaller stuff he'll be able to tell you better. But from a larger perspective, the only time we were, I think, in disagreement, which I very quickly agreed with him eventually, was in the adaptation of like what we should adapt of the book. I thought we should adapt the entire book into a single season. Satyanshu said, no, we shouldn't. We should actually slow it down. Let's get into Sunil's life. Let's get into his character. Let's feel him. And it was the right decision eventually. So that was the only time I think we had a disagreement, other than smaller and maybe smaller things. I don't know. Satyanshu will tell you.
No, I think I also remember just that bit. Apart from that, the discussions are so nuanced that you don't call that as disagreement. We are different personalities, and thank God that we are not exactly similar. Uh, I have a feeling that what we had finally, what the final product is actually, it has a lot of me, but it also has a lot of Vikram sir, and I think I have a feeling that if we didn't have that kind of a combination, perhaps this show wouldn't shape up like this. It would have taken some other shape, which also might have worked. But I'm very glad that the final tonally, dramatically, and even thematically, what we have achieved is a good blend of our different personalities.
And how challenging it is to adapt a book, and if there is a big one advantage as well.
The biggest advantage is that if it is incredible, anything that is dramatic and incredible, and you mention that it actually happened, it works very well with the audience. Always, it has always worked. Um, but since we decided to focus on only 4 years of Sunil Gupta's career, the material in the book was not sufficient to be
Exactly.
utilized into an entire season. So we had to do a lot of research outside of the book. Uh, One thing that we didn't want to change, and perhaps we managed to keep intact, is the spirit of the book, including the humane lens with which the book talks about the jail, and a lot of humor also in the book. But there were a lot of true incidents from outside of the book that we added. There was a lot of dramatization, absolute fictional events. Uh, so it was actually extremely challenging. The biggest challenge was actually, for me, the biggest challenge was I was speaking with a senior person, but I was writing a young boy. That was the biggest challenge.
Yeah, because book at the end of the day is just, it's text. So how do you get the references for characters? Of course, Mr. Sunil Gupta is still around and you can see him. But what about so many other characters which he mentions? Apart from the known ones, a lot of you saying research goes into that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but in India we also tend to be very uppity about fact meeting fiction. How do you reconcile the two? Is that a dilemma as makers you guys also face?
Look, I'm a huge fan of fact in the sense that I'm a history buff. I love it. And I think that some of the greatest stories potentially told are the ones that actually do mix fact and fiction. I think it's a great way of engaging your audience as to, oh my God, because my reaction when I read the book for the first time was like, oh my God, this really happened. This is how
Yeah.
Ranga's hanging happened. Or are you serious? This is how he got his job. There's so many of those things that are sometimes fact is crazier than fiction. And and that's, for me, that's fantastic. That kind of just like draws you into the story in such an interesting and unique way. And I think if you can merge both of them in a really, really great way, that's always the best outcome, I think, if you can.
Yeah, and he was talking about nuance. Mr. Motwane, your work is always realistic, yet it has all the complexity. It has all the nuances. a very tough balance. I mean, for us as viewers, of course, it's very fascinating, but is it a very tough balance to achieve again?
I mean, in my case, because I kind of live and breathe for that kind of stuff, so no. I think I think there is it's always like, I think the search for me is always try to find that balance for an audience between keeping it, um, keeping it simple enough where you can really invest yourself into some person, into my character. I think I tend to always kind of keep the character as the holy Bible, or my kind of like whatever, what do you want to call it, where keep that as pure as possible. The approach to character as pure as possible. So if people invest themselves in the character, then they go it. And I don't think audiences are. I mean, I have no problem challenging them. I think they like to be challenged. And it depends on what you're making, of course, and depends on the format you're trying to make. You can't do the same thing for a film that you're going to be saying that, okay, I'm making a 200 crore film that I want to talk to them about. But even then, you'd be surprised how many of the audiences like to be, like to be challenged. And I believe that. I think if you challenge them in a good way where you're not kind of isolating them and you're not alienating them, I think they enjoy it. They like it. They're up for it. They like to see their heroes dragged through the mud. So why not? And why not do it? I mean, what's the worst that can happen? That you won't get people won't appreciate it today, they'll appreciate it tomorrow. So.
But you've always been a critic's darling. But when it came to theaters, there were not too many audiences for several of your films. Is OTT more liberating in the sense that here you have, of course, the critics and the audiences both rooting for your work?
I No, absolutely. See, I think the kind of films that I made anyway, I think that there was a theatrical window for them, but most of the people were going to go and watch them on streaming anyway. And streaming, nahi, that time there was piracy. Like I think the audience that we were reaching out to, the slightly younger audience that was going to go and watch a film like an Udan or a Lutera, or was going to, they might go to the theater, might not go to the theater, but eventually the film would have a life afterwards, which we knew back then. I just think that streaming has kind of made it a little bit more apparent as to, it's now become a business model where you can, um, like a Lapata Ladies, for example, you can have a life in the theater and you can have a life on streaming, and they both can coexist with each other, and it can be very valid. So I just think that at that time it didn't happen, and then just for post-pandemic, I haven't released it from the theater since 2018, and it's not been by design. It's also just been quite coincidental as to the fact that it's just turned out this way, because there are things that I've been excited about, that I've been wanting to do, and then I've done them and finished them. And it just so happens that a lot of them have just been on streaming, or actually all of them have been on streaming.
And your casting process is very interesting. Again, we see these actors, we've seen them before, but somehow in your series or your films, they become someone very different. Right? Whether it's Ananya Pandey or back in time, whether it was Sonakshi Sinha, and right now even Rahul Bhat, and so many more, or Apar Shakti Khurana and Jubilee.
So a lot of credit, honestly, I believe goes to the casting directors. I enjoy it, and like I said, I think when you keep your character at the absolute center of everything, and sort of like do that, you cast accordingly. And once your actors also know that, like there's so much that they can play with, there's so much they can bring to the table. It's not like we're giving them a script and saying yehi karo. It's like you bring as much to the table as I'm bringing to the table. Let's find that together. So whether it's characters who've not been cast, in the sense that whether they're stars or people that have approached, so over the years, it's a Ronit Roy or a Sonakshi or a Nanya. I think the fact that they see that it's a challenge for them as well, because it's not, they can bring so much to it. It excites them. It excites them. It becomes a great relationship that we have, where we can sort of like work it. But all the other guys, if it's anything, I think it's always about like having the casting directors really, really um, pitch perfect casting. And I've seen this, on through Jogi
Yeah.
sir on my very first film with Udan, when he cast any of the boys. I've seen it with Vikrant Masi's casting that Atul Mongia did. You see the audition for the first time, you're like, wow, this guy is great. He's so fantastic. Where's he been? You see it with on Sacred Games, like Katekar's casting, for example, on Sacred Games, or any of these guys, or Bunty's casting. You're like, you see the audition, you're like, fantastic, fascinating. And the same with Black Warrant. Like when you're seeing a Zahaan Kapoor perform it, I didn't, I knew who Zahaan was. I maybe exchanged a couple of messages with him. I had no idea he was auditioning for this. Similarly, I had no idea that Apar Shakti was auditioning for Jubilee. If I had known, I would have probably told the casting director, "Don't bother. He's a comedy actor. Kuch nahi kar payega wo."
Uh-huh.
But but I didn't know about it. That was great. And I suddenly saw, and I'm surprised as much as the audience, I'm surprised in that first audition saying, wow, this guy's good. I think it's a lot of credit to them.
Of course, your work is like, as you yourself say, genre hopping. But can you say something about audience's fascination for crime? Somehow, crime series always work.
Well, it is, I guess, maybe in the streaming world that's become the new kind of like क्या बोलते हैं इसको? Um, when you go to the movies to kind of like forget about everything. I think in real life, your life is so mundane. You want to see crime instead. You go to the theaters to see song and dance and romance. You go to streaming to see true
Hmm.
crime stories. No, look, crime stories. I think they lend themselves to streaming very well because you can really see because streaming allows you to be dense with your storytelling. You don't have to be simple with your storytelling.
Hmm.
And the more dense you can be, the better it is for crime stories, specifically. That especially when you're going to be watching episode 5 and 6 and 7, you're coming closer and closer. If you
Hmm.
try and tell somebody in that moment, okay, Acha, what's going on? Somebody said, what's going on in this episode? You'll have to pause and say, Bhai, here, hang on 1 second. You spend an entire hour explaining to them.
So
Um,
what you're saying is the crime is our new escapism, new.
It is, but in this dream, but because it allows for really dense, interesting, complex storytelling, and I think the audience really gets into that.
Viewer and also as someone who reviewed the series, I had many takeaways. But was there anything in particular that you wanted audiences to take home? Take home, क्या they are sitting at home watching it anyway.
um, no, I think, and maybe Satyanshu is the right person to ask because he would get into. I mean, for me, it was just my fascination was like to look behind the scenes of a jail from the perspective of the jailers. I think in itself was something which was quite unique and quite fascinating. Not
Absolutely.
something that we've seen before. It's always been a prisoner perspective, or it's been like a jailbreak or something like that. I thought this was very interesting, and the idea that a very unlikely protagonist is going to end up becoming, will he, won't he become your hero? I think was a nice little take. So for me, it was like, how do you get the audiences to see something like that, and hopefully have them just as it always is, maybe just think a little bit more about the conditions in jail, how that, what's the parallel to society through that. But I mean, like I'm saying, I let Satyanshu kind of take that.
And the fact that the protagonist, Mr. Sunil Gupta, is around, does that help or does that also become a disadvantage because he would want you to present it in a certain manner? Because making things on live people is always tricky.
I don't think he had a he didn't have he trusted us completely to be able to do this. Every time he needed anything answered, he was more than happy to get on a phone call and answer any questions so. And he trusted us with the process, which is great. I mean, every time somebody does that, you just feel so empowered to do what you want to do. That it's the best thing that you can ask for.
And of course, we can expect a sequel, right?
Fingers crossed.
Huh?
We shall keep you informed.
No, yeah. I'm sure there will be a sequel.
We shall keep you informed.
Okay, but Jubilee has a sequel for sure.
We shall keep you informed about that also.
Okay, so you gave us Sacred Games. How much do you think? I mean, like one of the original first in this direction. How much do you think our content, Indian content, has evolved since then? I know you don't like the word content, but okay.
No, it has. It has. I think it's evolved to a place where we have enough. We can make many different things. We can end up making drama series, comedy series, crime series, legal series. You can make, and if you look at it from your landmark series since the inception of it, you've had series on cricket, on crime, on jails, on cops, on uh, a fictional town called Mirzapur to so look at the range. We look at the range of like what we've been able to make. You think and take yourself back 20 years. We didn't
Hmm.
have that kind of range in cinema, at all. So I think that in itself is a victory.
Hmm.
Yes, of course, as with anything, we can always do better. The writing can always be better across the board. But I do think when you look at the cream of the crop of what's kind of coming out, I'm quite happy with the state of how we are.
But in an industry that typically follows formula, what makes you break the mold each time?
Because there is no formula. Every formula will be made until it fails, right? Until either we run out of ideas. We've seen this happen so many times, time and again, in cinema as well. We've seen it happen where the success of Sholay ended up spawning an entire generation of people who said, "Arey, kahani ki kya zarurat hai? Let's just put one daku and one hero and one lady will have to dance on broken glass. Picture ban jayegi." And some of them worked until it stopped. It just, it failed. And then you had a period where it didn't, and then the new trend comes, and the new trend comes, and the new trend comes. But I think that every success you've seen has been people breaking that trend to create something fresh. So why follow a trend? I guess just try and break it anyway.
And what else is keeping you busy? And if you would like to say anything to your fans who, I mean, I'm sure most of us have watched Black Warrant, but anyone who may not have watched it.
Please watch it. Binge it if you would like. Watch it episode by episode if you would like. But please watch it because I think it's something that I don't think you've ever seen before. And I say this with all honesty. With all modesty also. I don't think it's something that we've seen in the entire. And like I said before, I don't know why no one's made a prison drama in India before. It surprised me that we are the first to actually come out with a proper prison drama. So.
And were you scared of any comparison with the Orange is the New Black?
Not at all. I'm far away from that.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much for your time and
Thank you,
pleasure
ma'am.
talking
Thank
to you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Bye.